I guess one of us should keep talking in case, right? So to make sure that we're actually, if the sound does kick on, so I'm going to continue to talk very mundanely to keep the sound going until we get some sort of confirmation that this is not going to be a Sondheim concert celebration with feedback. So I'm going to continue to talk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm
okay.
very mundanely to keep the sound going until we get some sort of confirmation that this is not going to be a Sondheim concert celebration with feedback. Okay, me hearing that echo, I think means that this is working and that someone in the room is listening to me. So, hello everyone. Sorry about that. Welcome to LALIFF Connect. My name is Manuel Betancourt. You probably didn't know this because you weren't able to hear me. So I'm glad we have everything working running. I'm the film and TV editor at Remescla, and thank you guys for bearing with us and for joining us for the Q&A for the Shorts Program 1. We have, as you can see, and as you already saw, a lot of the filmmakers joining us right now. They're all very eager to talk about their work. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown. What we're going to do is we're going to work film by film and have just a couple questions with each filmmaking team. And then at the end, hopefully we'll bring everyone back, and hopefully we'll still have enough time for some audience Q&As. So I'm just going to introduce everyone really quickly because I want to get back to talking with everyone. So from Lady Justice, we have director Sara Guidetti and lead actress Mariana Vicente. From Rizzo, we have director Jeanette Delaunay. From Say You Will, we have Maria Sosa. From The Undocumented Lawyer, we have co-directors Chris Temple and Sanki Grassi, producer Jenna Kelly, and the subject Elizabeth Mateo. From Eileen on the Moon, we have Claudia Ruiz. From Wilderness, we have Andrew Vasquez. And from We Gay to Mexicano, we have Lorena Laurenco and Jorge Molina. And I'm already running out of breath. But again, it's because I want us to get back on track. So right now I want to focus on the Lady Justice team. So you'll see a couple of windows sort of slowly disappear. Perfect. So in our rehearsal, this went great. So now we're just going to do it all over again. So Sarai, this is, as I told you before, this is a very sort of different film or from the types of stories that we get about human trafficking. So can you tell us a little bit about what drove you to create sort of Lady Justice and to give her this title?
Yeah. So for me, whenever I create a project, I want to have a message behind it. And I was doing a lot of research on what I wanted to focus on, and sex trafficking, human trafficking kept pulling at me and my heartstrings. I was completely heartbroken and outraged by all the stories that I was listening to, watching, and reading about. And then I also met someone who became a friend and is actually in the film, who did sting operations and helped rescue a lot of the women and children who were close to being trafficked. So I wanted to take that approach to feel a little bit of justice because we don't really see a lot of that. And as for the title, like with Lady Justice, it was temporary at first, but it stuck because, you know, it's very much about this lady who was a victim of being trafficked herself and now taking it into her own hands to get some justice. And I know I said this earlier, but like, don't try this at home. Like Vigilante is, you know, she's definitely a powerhouse and amazing, but I don't recommend it. But what I do want is just for you to get a little bit of, you know, the outrage that I felt and want to be part of it in some way or want to create change. And it can even be just through dialogue or supporting a lot of different organizations that are doing something for trafficking or against trafficking.
Yeah. And this was all, of course, as you said, handled by professionals. Do not try this at home. So Mariana, I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about, you know, what it was to shoot those, you know, kick-ass action sequences and what that felt like.
Well, it was both super challenging and exciting at the same time. Just, you know, as an actress, I mean, of course I want to explore everything, and I'd never been able to do my own stunts. And Sarai was just like so open to it. We had very little time to prepare, but she just like trusted me and gave me that freedom of like, you know, she put everything together. She had me do some training and a lot of rehearsal before we shot, but it felt good to have that just to feel like she trusted me and she was taking care of me, because, you know, these action sequences are, you kind of have to protect the actor and the crew and even just like from the location, which we, I'm going to say it, we actually ended up like busting a wall, not like going through a wall, but but even like things like that you have to consider. But she was very, like, that's the only thing that happened, but she was super careful, and I felt like really well protected. And she was so encouraging as an actor. That's like just like the best feeling, you know, to have a director just like be like, oh yeah, you can do this, you're awesome. So yeah, that was really exciting, but definitely hard work.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it shows. And sort of thank you both for joining us today, and hopefully you'll be able to join us later. So I'm going to say goodbye to you very briefly and welcome Jeanette from Rizzo.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, so as everyone who watched it knows, this is a film about a Latina with melanin. And of course, I wanted to ask, you know, how much of this was taken wholesale from your real life experience or real life anecdotes?
Pretty much every experience that the lead actress has in the story, I went through. What's dramatized is that I put all the scenes together to happen in one day. And all these things kind of happened to me in the course of like many years to get me to this point. Yeah, so it seems a little ridiculous, but I really did have a lot of very awkward moments like that in audition rooms and in my life.
Yeah, and then sort of the short ends with this sort of moment of like, you know, the character sort of taking it on herself and being like, you know, I'm going to write myself the part. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, that can be sometimes a burden, right? Like telling minority or underrepresented groups to be like, you know, just do it yourself. And how do you think that the short sort of speaks to that?
Yeah, it's a tricky subject, and I think different points of views are represented in the film. And definitely, for the most part, the lead actress and her acting teachers, you know, kind of romanticize the notion of just being a master of your craft, and after that, you're undeniable, which can be true sometimes. What happens when just no one's writing for you? Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands. That being said, you know, if you have no interest in writing and you never want to make a film and you want to be an actor, like, don't try it, because it's really hard work to be a filmmaker. So that's why I included in the story that she was a creative writing major and she wrote a series. So she obviously had a talent for it. And she was kind of falling victim to this idea of like, I'm going to get chosen. I don't have to do that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you really get that struggle of like, she's just playing with her to her strengths. So thank you again for taking the time sort of for your film and for taking the time to chat today. So we're going to keep going, and I'm going to invite the entire team from The Undocumented Lawyer to join me. And thank you. Okay, so I wanted to ask, obviously, you know, in these sort of short documentaries, I'm always curious, you know, how did you guys learn and meet Lisbeth? And was there any hesitation, Lisbeth, on your part to sort of take part in this project?
So in 2017, actually, a friend of ours was looking for a lawyer in immigration court, and we reached out to Lisbeth and immediately could tell that she wasn't like any other lawyer we'd ever met. You know, her passion for her work was so strong, and it was clear that you know, this was somebody who was different, and we had to cover this story. And you know, Lisbeth says in the film that, you know, this country is about giving you the opportunity to actually fight, and we believe that she shouldn't have to fight alone. So we wanted to elevate that story. And Lisbeth, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like? Yeah,
were you comfortable shooting with us?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I mean, I have to be honest, there was some hesitation to work on a film, not because of Chris or Zach, but because I had been approached by other filmmakers in the past. and they didn't really take the time to explain to me their vision for a film, what they really wanted to do with the story. Some approached me with basically asking for footage, for pictures about different actions and the different things that I had worked on as an organizer. So, and I knew other undocumented young people had worked with other filmmakers, and unfortunately they did not have the greatest of experiences. They felt used. They felt like their voices were not really heard. So I hesitated to work with Chris and Zach, not because of them, but I do have to say that they really took the time to explain to me their vision for this film, what they wanted to do with it. And then as we were shooting the film, they really made me a part of it. They made me feel a part of it. They consulted with me about ideas that they had. They never pressured me to share more than what I wanted to share. They really respected the boundaries that I set for the film, for myself, for my family. So I really appreciate that. And I think that is how filmmakers and undocumented people could work and should actually work together.
Yeah, and I feel like you really feel it in the film. So one of the things with documentaries like this, and when you have a subject like Lisbeth, I'm sure you guys could have kept going and going and sort of keep following. So I'm curious, like, when do you choose to say, this is the story we want to tell, this is when we stop, this is when we end the film?
Poor Lisbeth. I mean, we shot for almost 2 years. So that is, it's such a hard decision. I think what really struck me the second time we got to shoot with Adith actually is seeing the transformation that she had gone through, and in many ways because of Lisbeth. And that's when we realized that that's what this story is about. It's about how much it takes to fight your case and to lead your own battle. I mean, I think we were just so impressed that Lisbeth not only does such a good job on the legal side, but also does such a good job at empowering her clients to fight for themselves. And, going into a film, you don't necessarily know what the film is until those moments happen. And it was really on that second chance of shooting with Adith that we saw that, and we realized, okay, this is the film. It's time to go to the edit. And poor Lisbeth, of course, that doesn't mean we didn't keep shooting, because there's always in the edit process, there's like these moments you realize you need to go and capture. But with that kind of as the takeaway, we realized this is a really important message in this year, especially, and we wanted to set Lisbeth up to help more people like Adith. So Jenna actually just set up a fund that she can tell you a little bit about.
Yeah, basically in immigration court, people with a lawyer are 10 times more likely to be able to stay in the US. So it's really important that people have representation and a fair chance in court. So together with Lisbeth, we launched the Undocumented Lawyer Legal Fund, which will help pay the legal fees for her clients who need assistance, including a lot of asylum seekers and Adith herself. So you can donate more and find out more about that at undocumentedlawyer.org.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect sort of point to end in. So thank you guys, and thank you, Lisbeth, for joining us tonight and for all the work you do. And then I'm going to ask Mariel from Say You Will to join me now.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
So we go from one documentary to another, and I think one of the things that we hear in your documentary is that we don't get to hear a lot about gang injunctions before. It's something I never heard about. So I was curious, how did you learn about them, and when was it that you decided to create this documentary around them?
Yeah, so in 2018, I was looking for my next project. I had done a couple documentaries before that, but it was my first time shooting a subject or something in the US. So I previously had like a team with me, or like a company, or just someone to come along with me in this whole process. But this was the first time that I was taking on the producer role as well, and then I was taking on the production. So I asked help to the European Peace Institute to kind of help me navigate through the issues that we can talk about, because I knew I wanted to make something in the social issues line. And it results that one of the lawyers that worked there had gone to one of my screenings before, And she was like, oh, I know you, like, I really liked the documentary, and I think it got an impact on her. And she said, I have someone you want to meet. And she introduced me to Sean, which is the lawyer that appears on the movie. And Sean, we contacted with him and we had a long conversation, and he introduced me to the whole Salgado family. And that's how I started meeting. I first met Gio first. It was going to be about him, but then obviously things kind of changed.
And this is when I'm curious, because it's sort of the documentary is about him, but we sort of hear about him from his entire family. So I'm curious, like, sort of when did that decision, or when did that happen, or how did that happen?
So like I said, we had a previous meeting with him. The first meeting was just going to be me, him, and my script partner. But the thing is that it was surprising the time we met, because he brought his mother, and we were not expecting to meet his mother at the first time. So we realized at that moment, as they were telling the story, that Gio is actually a really shy person, and that the power and the intensity of the story was really carried by the mother, and she kind of overtook the whole conversation. And then when we left the meeting, we looked at each other and we're like, okay, I think we have a different story. I think there's a new perspective we need to navigate. And when we're talking to the mother, the brother came in, and then more subjects came in. And we realized that the voices that we wanted to focus on was, I think, the people that were indirectly affected by Gio, because we often hear about the main character and his quest and his problems, but I think we tend to forget the people around him or the family that maybe they were more affected than him, because at the end, I think they lost more, they lost his brother and they lost her son. So that really drove me to tell the story from their perspective. And that's why the title is Say You Will, because I think it's the voice of them, because at the end, all they want is for him to come back. So it's kind of like, say you will come back, So I think I stay with them, and I was hoping we could get enough of Gio, but I was just more interested in showing these two characters,
Yeah, and I think it fleshes it out, and it sort of makes it sort of a more complete portrait. So thank you, Mariel. And now I'm gonna bid you goodbye and welcome Claudia from Eileen on the Moon.
Hola, buenas noches, Manuel.
Hola, Claudia. So Claudia's going to be answering in Spanish, and I'll be translating. So, yours is one of the animated shorts on the program, and the animation allows expressions like te voy a mandar a la luna, so we can see what that expression looks like. Is that how the short began? Is that the origin of the short?
La animación tiene como posibilidad explotar toda metáfora con la forma, con el color o con las texturas, pero el inicio del corto fue que esta historia le pasó a una amiga mía, que ella le dijo esa frase a su hijita, y cuando su hija escuchó eso, se rompió a llorar y dijo: pero yo ahí no voy a tener nada para comer, voy a estar sola, no voy a tener mis juguetes. Entonces, lo que a mí me conmovió es esta cuestión de cómo la palabra para los niños pequeños es una realidad. Entonces, ese es el juego que a mí me interesaba recuperar en la película, y mostrar esos dos mundos, el de la mamá, una mujer trabajadora y sola, y de la niña que necesita el tiempo de su mamá, y cómo estos se encuentran a veces no tan fácilmente.
So obviously animation has this way of making metaphors sort of feel alive, both in their textures and the way in terms of wordplay. In fact, the short was based on a friend of Claudia's whose own daughter, the story that we see in the short actually happened to a friend of Claudia's. And when the mother said, I'm going to send you to the moon, she could see her daughter sort of break down, because she understood it very literally. And she said, but then I'm not going to have anything to play with. I'm not going to have any food. And sort of that was sort of the origin of the short, of sort of trying to visualize sort of how a kid understands that sort of expression, and then just sort of really show both the mother's world and the little girl's world. And sort of, we have this working mother and we have this young, sometimes needy girl, and how the two worlds are sort of colliding. And I wanted to talk a little bit, Claudia, about, stop motion, which just feels so tactile. What do you think it adds to the story and to the short?
A mí me interesó trabajar con la directora de arte esta cuestión, que por un lado trabajamos con todo material de reciclaje del mundo de hoy para hacer todo lo que es la escenografía, las maquetas y demás. Y lo único plástico y blando y nuevo era la textura de los dos personajes. Y en estos dos sentidos, lo plástico me permitía generar más expresividad en los personajes y que iba creciendo en el mismo trabajo, porque por ejemplo eso de la cantidad de brazos que le salen a la mamá fue en el rodaje. Cuando yo estaba trabajando con el animador, cómo quería que fuera esa toma, empezamos a jugar y ahí salió la posibilidad de hacer toda esa cantidad de brazos. Y por otro lado, por ejemplo, la textura de la luna también son todos elementos de la realidad que dan esa dureza y lejos de ser una luna romántica, es una luna de soledad, a donde queda Aileen anclada, esa ruptura con la mamá.
So one of the things you'll notice about the short is that a lot of the scenography and the work that Claudia did with her art director was really focused on recycled materials, sort of from our real world. And the only use of plastic was in the two characters, which allowed for that sort of pliability and that flexibility of expression that gives you sort of the white expressions that you see in both those characters. So for example, that moment when you see sort of the mother is like, she's growing all these different limbs because she's trying to do all these things, that was something that came from, a moment of shooting and sort of trying to sort of figure how you could portray that, and the fact that they were working with these plastic materials allowed for that to happen. And then the sense that there's a harshness to the world compared to the sort of plasticity of these characters. And then in terms of the moon, again, you see it, it's all made of really harsh shapes, this is not a romanticized moon. This is a very sort of lonely moon, which is where Aileen sort of finds herself anchored. Sort of all of that plays into sort of the feelings that you get in this beautiful short. Claudia, I hope I got everything that you said.
Thank you.
No problem, and thank you. And now I'm going to pass it on to Andrew Vasquez from Wilderness. Thank you, Claudia. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. So I wanted to talk about sort of the title and the suggestiveness of it, especially for those of us who've seen the film. So if you talk a little bit about what you wanted to sort of accomplish with that title.
Yeah, I'm an LA native and I work out of downtown Los Angeles, and I've worked for a long time in community with indigenous and incarcerated youth. And I've also worked with population that are without homes. And having worked in that environment with the neighborhood and essentially being part of the community of downtown Los Angeles, you see a lot of homeless persons in the city. And what we wanted to evoke in creating the piece and this idea of wilderness is to kind of pull on the analogy or visible analogy of this camping mentality, where you see dozens of tents, not even dozens, hundreds of tents, and what that really means to be out there on the street and to kind of quantify or at least create this analogy of it being the wild and without a home, and you're going to be subjected to the elements and to anything that could possibly happen in that environment.
Mm-hmm. And then, as you said, so this is something that's happening, here in Los Angeles, but also everywhere. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you hope audiences take away from the film, especially when you give us all those sort of information sort of at the end?
Yeah, I mean, from the piece itself, what we're trying to really do is just create this sense of empathy. To say that we have a solution and to kind of give like a call to action would be inadequate. There's this like famous quote from Oscar Wilde. He says, "The proper aim is to try and reconstruct a society on such a basis that poverty will be impossible. So that's like, we can't do anything to really resolve this as just making a film, but we can kind of inspire folks to keep that in their mind and mentality that, you know, these are individuals, these are persons, there are families out there, and kind of an illusion within the piece is that this young boy, Terrence, and the father are the same person, and that there's a lot of this self-talk, and yeah, just to recognize their humanity. I think a lot of the time it takes us to see the child in a person to go ahead and sympathize with them. And so the whole piece is really trying to create that empathy and sympathy, and to recognize that they're individuals and that they need help and they need assistance, and they're that vulnerable child always.
Yeah, and that we need to see them and sort of acknowledge them. So thank you again, Andrew. And then for a last group of filmmakers, I'm going to invite Lorena and Jorge from Muy Gay to Mexicano. Hello.
Hello.
So from the title to everything else, you know, the first thing that I wanted to ask was, like, where did the idea for the film come from?
Sure. So this idea came around 3 years ago. A long story. I was about to process my work visa. I was from Mexico, and there was just so a complication on the process that made me have to go back home for about 8 months after living in the US for around 4 or 5 years. So I had to move back home until all my paperwork was processed. And it was the first time I had been home in an extended period of time after coming out. So it was the first time I had to really grapple with my gay identity while living at the same time in Mexico. And being in that, it just struck me how in conflict those two identities were with each other, and how I had to code switch, and it almost feel like two different people I had to be while I was living there. And it was a long process to be able to merge them together and learn them to cohabitate with each other. So I just wanted to kind of make that manifestation physical and tangible with actual people that represented those identities. And I, of course, reached out to Lorena. We met in college, and we went through the same immigration process at the same time. So she knew this kind of part better than anyone else, and she was great and on board. And yeah, that's kind of the origin of that.
Very nice. And then the one thing sort of I have to talk about is sort of this apartment where the short takes place. And I wanted to talk about the art direction, because I think so much of this compartmentalization that you're talking about of these different identities is so obvious in the apartment. So if you could talk a little bit about the space.
Yeah, so Jorge and I spoke a lot about how it was so important to us to kind of visually convey those two separate identities, and to do it very vividly, because it is such a subjective short. And then we made sure to keep everything that was Juan related and kind of in relation to Mexican culture, very red, and everything blue. Everything that was very Daniel related and related to K culture, very red. And then JD, who was kind of like the confluence of those two identities, in purple. And tried to emanate that very vividly just in every single shot that we could. And then kind of just conflate those two identities as well, culturally. And so every time you see a bit of Christine Baranski, you see a Cavalera. Every time you see a Liza Minnelli record, you also see some Loteria cards. And so we just kind of wanted to convey that as much as we could, and so vividly and intensely in the production design. And then we also need to give a huge shout out to our amazing production designer, Shayna, who did all of that.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I was going to shout out to her.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. Now I'm going to ask sort of everyone else to, again, magically appear back on the screen. And sadly, we only have time for one question. And it's a question that sort of a lot of people are asking, which is where we can watch these shorts. So in terms of LALIFF Connect, I can say that there may be a chance to have an encore screening, that's still being sorted out. So be on the lookout for updates. But I want to just call out each team, and if you could let us know, is this available to watch somewhere else? Is this available for rental? Or is there somewhere else that we can sort of look for you or your work? So Lady Justice.
Yeah, right now it's still doing festivals, and with the whole COVID thing, we don't know when we'll get the next one. I think Austin After Dark is screening our film in September, so if you're in Austin, it'll be there. But we hope to put it online soon. But hopefully, LALIFF does one more.
Perfect. Rizzo?
En mi caso, lo mismo. En mi caso, todavía Aileen está en los festivales, así que en un tiempito más sí va a estar en alguna plataforma de streaming.
Okay. Eileen is still not in the moon, but doing rounds on in the festival circuit, so hopefully coming soon. Jeanette?
Hi, am I allowed to mention another festival?
I think so.
So there's another online screening in a month. This was the world premiere, by the way. So this is like the first time most people are saying it. So it's an official selection of the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival in a month, and that will also be a online screening.
Perfect. Mariel and Say You Will?
Yeah, same as the others. Right now, we're just starting with the circuit, but soon it will be available to watch it.
Perfect. Someone from the Undocumented Lawyer, maybe who wants to take it? Zach?
Sure, yeah. So we're working on distribution. We're also setting up community screenings with Lisbeth and Adit. So if you're interested, you can go to undocumentedlawyer.org and sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be sending out a bunch of stuff soon.
Perfect. Andrew and Wilderness?
Same as everyone else, just kind of going through festivals, and it'll be online after probably it does that circuit, so towards the end of the year. So thank you.
Perfect. Muike to Mexicano?
Same thing. We're still doing festival rounds. There's an upcoming festival, as long as our situation allows it. And then we also have an Instagram of the same name if people want to follow it, because when we have it out, we'll post it there.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us both here and out there. Do remember to stay tuned for Cesar Manto's live performance again here in latinofilm.org/live. And yeah, keep a lookout for all of these amazing films in